Oh, good. So, welcome to season 2 of the Virtually Agile videocast. And as you guys know, a firm believer in neurodiversity I am, and therefore I always seek to amplify newer voices as well as hearing from established leaders as well. Today's guest is CEO and founder of Adventures with Agile, one of my favorite Agile training organizations, author of the book Change, a blogger, speaker, and trainer included of yours truly. I've been to an Adventures with Agile course, Agile team facilitator, and Agile coaching. I'm pleased to welcome Simon Powers to the show. How are you doing, Simon?
Brilliant. Well, thanks for having me here. It's an absolute privilege. I also have been following your work as well, especially on the things you post on LinkedIn and the incredible retrospectives and things and other work that you've been doing. And yeah, it's fantastic to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Not a problem. Well, just for those of our listeners who may be less familiar with your work, Simon, would you tell us a little bit more about yourself, your journey with Agile?
Yeah, sure. It's been a long winding journey, and I started many years ago building software and large scale applications for typically big companies, and I got into the architecture and things like that, and really was looking at how to make organizations fantastic through the lens of software. And as I progressed through this journey, I realized that many of the challenges that we've got, which is to build these applications from a technical perspective, have been solved. You know, a lot of the technical challenges to do that kind of thing have been solved. And the real challenge was actually aligning mostly dysfunctional organizations to combine together to be able to collaborate and innovate with these fantastic tools, the internet tools, all these kind of back in my day, like 20 odd years ago when I first started, the internet was, was a new thing. And so it was really how to leverage these incredible tools in the organization. And it was really about figuring out how we can get organizations to collaborate on large scale. And this sort of led me into organizational design and coaching. And really over the last sort of 10-15 years or so, I've been working at that sort of large scale at the most senior levels of the organization, hopefully to bring in some of the things which enable those fantastic dreams that we have for software and the internet to actually take place. So I kind of see myself as an enabler of for other people to do wonderful value creation. And that's kind of the role that I play. And in terms of a journey, like I say, it's been a long, winding one, which I won't go into massive detail on. But probably the most significant events really were creating Adventures with Agile back in 2013, I think it was, when having operated at this level for quite some time, it's quite a difficult and lonely role. The role that we play as coaches. We are by definition at the forefront of an organization, helping them really as a leadership role, helping the organization move forwards and to take the opportunities that are in front of it and make the most of them. And when you do that on your own, it's a very lonely and difficult job. And often there aren't the people within the organization to support you and to help you and to sort of de-stress and to share ideas and to try new things. So I created Adventures with Agile to link together people all over the world who were also in this position. And at that time, there weren't very many enterprise coaches, if really any, who were operating across the whole organization. Most things were operating at the team level. Of course, that's changed now. And I do like to think that at Adventures with Agile, we have had quite a bit of impact across the world on that change to bring about some of the thought leaders and combining some of these ideas to push forward to the forefront of enterprise coaching and leadership coaching as well. So that's kind of what I've been doing, really trying to make a difference as much as I can in the world and remove some of the suffering, as Craig Larman says as well, remove some of the suffering from software development, but really remove suffering from the whole of work.
Yeah, I love that description. I like your description of yourself as an enabler. That's one way you could describe an enterprise coach. I have personally been described as an enabler, but also a disruptor or an agitator. And I don't mind those either. I tend to think of myself as an agitator or a disruptor with a purpose. It's always in the interest of continuous improvement. I'm not doing it to be spiteful or frustrating. I'm not doing it to be annoying. I'm doing it in the pursuit of excellence, of better ways of working. And I had a conversation not too long ago now with someone who said that they describe themselves as a full stack agile coach. And I was like, well, what does that mean? What do you mean by that? That's an intriguing term. I've heard of full stack developer, but full stack agile coach. And they started saying, well, they don't specialize in anything in particular. They like to be broadly applied across many disciplines of agile coaching. I thought, okay, and that prompted me to think about what I consider myself to be, what type of coach I am. And you mentioned it yourself, removing the harm in people's way or making people's lives better. Very similar for me. Consider myself a people first or a people focused agile coach, someone whose work is all about, on an organizational level, trying to remove all of the little blockers, impediments, all of the frustrations, all the things that stop them from being as successful as they can be.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. It's a brilliant description. And a lot of the time, because we are sort of, we live and breathe this stuff. And as I can see that you're the same, it's we're nerds in our own way, if I may say so. We are deeply entrenched in the world of organizational change. And there are so many different parts to that, which, everything from, you mentioned neuroscience and at the beginning, and, how people change and how they evolve, how people learn is so radically different across different individuals. So you've got the whole people development, people growing, being able to deal with more complexity, being able to hold ambiguity, but not get overwhelmed by it. So there's the whole people side of things. And then we've got relationships, which is a whole nother level of complexity other than the individual. How do relationships work? One-to-one relationships, team relationships, and then relationships across a whole group of people or an organization of people. And then, of course, there's the more sort of what I call the sort of horizontal or the harder skills, which is actually learning about agile processes, learning about how work can flow through a system, how we measure work, how we get value to the customer, how we organize ourselves through structure and process, and all of those kind of things, which are also needed to enable an organization to make the most of its the opportunities presented to it. So it is a hugely deep discipline with many things, and it takes a lot to be able to operate in this space at that level, to hold it all together, really, and to have gone that deep.
And I'm completely okay with your description there about being nerdy about it. That's absolutely what I am. I'm passionate. I consider myself a philomath, someone who loves learning new things. And that applies to topics I'm passionate about, including agile coaching. And it's one of those topics where I could look at what agile coaching is, and I could start with just, for example, the competency matrix from Lisa Atkins. And you could look at that and you could probably spend a lifetime specializing in just one area and becoming an amazing facilitator, an amazing mentor, an amazing teacher, or whatever the rest of them are. Or I know what the rest of them are, but all of the rest of them are. And it's one of those things where, as I learn more, I realize how much more I don't know. As I delve a little bit more into a certain topic, I discover there's more I'm not aware of. True knowledge is knowing you know nothing. I love that quote from Socrates, and it applies so much to my life now. And this is why I love learning new things. It's why I engage in communities of practice. It's why I share with lots of people what I've learned, because I'm equally looking to learn from others as well.
Yeah, and it is really, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Learning is the key. And I think there's been a few mentions to this, but I think Craig Larman mentioned something like this. It's the second time I mentioned him now. But Craig Larman he mentioned at the LESS conference in Amsterdam just recently about how it's not so much about adaptability, but it's about the ability to who's fastest at learning is the sort of thing. And I thought about this in my own life, and also in terms of hiring people, and who do we need in organizations to make agility work. And it's not necessarily the most knowledgeable, because we know that situations change radically, things change quickly, job roles move around, different opportunities come about. And so it's not so much who knows the most, it's about who can learn the fastest and has the right sort of attitude and ability to learn. And there's a beautiful graph which sort of on the y-axis, it sort of shows amount of knowledge that you've got, and someone's quite high up but has a very slow learning curve. Would you prefer to sort of hire that sort of person, or someone who has a low knowledge but a very steep ability to learn? And very quickly you see the person with the steep learning ability to learn, or who can learn fastest, can adapt quickest. And obviously in our changing environments, that's very, very useful. So
it's interesting, isn't it, that learning fast moniker or description there. One of the common phrases you'll hear in the agile coaching circles, or has been around for a while now, is that fail fast concept. And it's been around for a while now, and I embraced it initially because I understood the intent behind it. But I think it's one of those ones where I have observed certain demographics don't like it. Failure is still this stigmatized thing. No one wants to fail. It feels bad to fail. So instead, one of my own values is learn fast, learn often.
Yes.
And I encourage people to rebrand failure as learning, right? Yes. Don't think about it as failure, just think about it as a learning opportunity. And therefore, I encourage people to learn fast, learn often. You look at books like Better Value, Sooner, Safer, Happier. They say one of the main phrases that I recall coming out from that was think big, start small, learn fast. That pace of learning, pace of innovation, pace of change, your ability to adapt to that, I think is key to surviving in this current VUCA world. I hate saying that phrase, but VUCA world.
There have been some certain phrases, haven't there, that have come up in that we've all kind of taken on board in our industry. Yeah, exactly, and definitely those there. But they are adequate, and they do describe that. It's funny because there's also another aspect to learning, which I think is which is really good to talk about. So when we're looking at organizations, we can start to think, right, well, what environment would be best to create for people to be able to increase the angle of their learning? How can they learn more? How can people be in an environment where they can learn more? And this can be a good place to start for leaders who are looking to see, well, what does it mean to lead with agility? Well, one of those things would be, what environment can I create which enables and enhances the learning of my staff? So that's one aspect which I think comes out of this. So rather than thinking that people are fixed in their ability to learn, because often people can learn better in different styles and different ways. We've certainly learned that as a training company. There isn't one way of learning. So how could we supply an environment which offers different ways to learn, different styles of learning, so that everybody can learn at the same time collaboratively? And those are kind of key elements of leading with agility, I think.
It's definitely an observation that I've made from my teaching, my imparting of wisdom upon teams myself, is that there are various different learning styles and people embrace different ones. I from my preference, I love using, I guess, the tactical hands-on game style of learning, because I like to be involved and I like it to be hands-on and I like it to be in there in the moment. And I resonate less with the role play style of learning. Because I don't know why, there's an element of resistance there. Maybe it feels uncomfortable. I'm not sure it is, but I always dread doing them. But equally, I probably learn more from them than I realize I'm going to after I've done them. But there's definitely various styles that resonate with different people. And when I'm looking to do these sorts of trainings, I'm increasingly looking at how I can make that experience tailored to the individual, rather than just being broadly applied across everyone, saying, well, everyone's just going to do this course or this online learning thing, and then they're expected to know everything.
Yes, exactly. And different subjects, I think, lend themselves to different styles as well. So for example, if you're learning coaching, you can't really learn coaching from a book. You can learn about coaching, but you can't learn to coach. So you have to really have someone else there who's coaching you, and you're coaching them, and you practice it, and you have someone helping you get it right. It's the same with swimming. You can't learn swimming by watching a video. You've got to get in the water, get on with it, and give it a go. And I was gonna
say, we're not at that phase yet where we've got like a machine like in the Matrix where you can just plug it into your temple and download the knowledge into your brain and suddenly you learn kung fu. We're not there yet. So therefore, sometimes we do have to get that tactile hands-on experience and actually practice it.
And other things I think are good at learning. So some things, I'm a very fast reader, and when I watch videos or audio books, I like to watch them or read them on 1.5 speed. So I can absorb information very quickly if it's kind of knowledge that's just about facts and about models, that kind of thing. I can download that stuff by listening fast. But so that's a good platform for that for me. But the coaching would be required, hands-on. So I think that's being acknowledging that and building those kind of environments into the organization is key. Another thing which I think is also really important is about reducing risk. So when we're looking at sort of organizations and what they've got these opportunities, they've got a market that might be changing, and they want to make the most of that. That requires an organization to shift and change and perhaps operate in a different way of working. And there's a risk to that. And so we don't want to keep creating change at a high risk. We want to lower that risk. And learning and the method of learning, being able to create an environment around learning, is another way of reducing the risk and the cost of continual ongoing change. So we can see it not just as a function of doing the right thing and keeping up to date, but it's actually a matter of lowering risk. And if you look at from an investment point of view into any business, you look at, well, how much am I investing? What am I going to get back? And what's my risk factor? And if I've got the same money back but a lower risk, that's a better investment. So investing in your company's learning, in somebody's company's learning, is if leaders invest in their company, is what I'm saying, in terms of a learning environment, actually lowering the risk, which is a better investment opportunity.
What's interesting is there's almost like what sprang to mind as you were describing that was almost like a technical debt, but on the knowledge acquisition or the change side of things. So if you have an environment where a company isn't investing in that change, they're changing infrequently, then the time the next time they try to or are forced to make any sort of fundamental change, it will be costly in terms of it being time intensive, difficult. Whereas if you've got a company, an organization, an environment that's building that learning and that change in, every time they do that, it will be that much easier. Just like when we have removing technical debt in software delivery. So there's almost like a knowledge or a knowledge acquisition or a change debt that you could incur by not building in that sort of environment.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. Organizational debt, structured debt, and knowledge debt. And building that environment in keeps that debt low, so that there's the ability to change. Yeah, exactly. And the other interesting thing about learning is I think it was Peter Senge who came up with the idea of the learning organization, or certainly it was a lot of his books, or his talks and things, which made it popular. And I feel like the learning organization is fantastic, and most people haven't even got to that space yet at all. However, I think that there is a stage further than that, which is the meaning-making organization. And if we look at decision-making, often decision-making is based upon not so much what we've learned, but the meaning that we make out of any given context and the right way forwards. And so I think that a lot of the approach to agility can start with learning. How do we take this information in? How do we keep growing our staff? How do we keep adapting? But also it's around how do we collectively meaning make? So if you think that with knowledge work, we've got people who are doing the value creation, people who are building things, software developers, designers, people who are on the front line, say, talking to customers. All these people have their own window into the world. They've all got one small jigsaw piece of what the whole company of knowledge. And when you start combining all of those different jigsaw pieces, suddenly you get to see the whole picture of the jigsaw. And typically the leadership styles that we have in most organizations are very not more predict and control than command and control, and information goes up and down and doesn't really go that much across. And so really leaders who are making decisions are operating on a very, very small, thin piece of the whole jigsaw puzzle. And often they don't get the information even from the people working for them. So we've got this very unreadable jigsaw that the organization really needs to be able to see, to be able to optimize holistically across the organization. And so when we're looking at agile transformations, I think that organizations would be a lot better off if we could create the kind of type of facilitation and group activities that bring in information. And this is not only information about what people are doing, but the information, the experiences they're having, the emotional experiences they're having, the feelings they have around what's happening in the organization, what matters to them most, bringing that together into a big picture so that strategy and next steps can be holistically made across with this big one picture. And I'm not seeing that happen a lot in organizations. And I think that's missing a trick there.
Yeah, this is interesting. Is something in an area that I'm increasingly investing and experimenting with is how you enable that bigger picture, how you en masse crowdsource and collaboratively share these sorts of things. And I've been doing so more recently through town hall sessions, because I'm facilitating those on behalf of the digital side of my company across all the 13 squads we have here. And I'm doing these town halls in this participative, interactive way, rather than the traditional, which usually used to be this top-down, here's what's important, here's the vision, go and do it, guys. And maybe a bit of Q&A at the end. I'm increasingly building in these interactive and using virtual whiteboards and Miro and things like that to enable people to participate, share, right? What experiments should we try next? Where is there? I did a snow day themed one recently that was all built in the mountains, right? And there was something I created called the Pain Avalanche, and it was kind of loosely based on Lisa Adkins' Pain Snake, right? So there was like an avalanche of post-it notes falling down the side of the mountain, and I was like, right, tell us where you are experiencing pain in the organization. And what that leads into is lots of little inputs of data where people are struggling. Systemically, we can then, as an organization, work on how to improve those things for those people. So we're hearing their problems and then going and solving them en masse, rather than it being that up comes through the Scrum Master from they flag that impediment up to this team, and so on and so forth. It was just en masse, the ability to see these things and everyone's exposed to them transparently.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And if anyone can create innovative and exciting and engaging workshops like that, I know that it will be you. So I'm not surprised to hear that you're doing this and that you've got some fantastic, just with your description there, I can just see the whole town hall. I mean, I'm imagining it with people in person, but of course, these days it would be all online. But either way, yeah, what a fantastic vision. So yeah, I can imagine this in this particular instance, it's about what pains people, what matters to them, what's the most important that they want to approach right now. And then you can step back from that and go, right, well, look at this. All these people have similar pains. These people have different pains. How can we then go approach creating experiments which then reduce this pain and remove that? And of course, that could be done in many different ways, but yes. Yeah.
And this is why I also subscribe to kind of the health check models that you can do. So I've got 13 squads currently, and doing a health check with each individual one just gives like a red, yellow, amber, red, amber, green view, but also a trajectory. And then you extrapolate that across all the squads and you can see trends, right? There's lots of red in this area, right? What can we do to help people release things better? And then you can see that over 9 months, if you do them every 3 months quarterly, for example, you can see trends in direction. Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? And that just helps you form the next experiment. And it can also just be one way of visualizing improvement or things getting worse. So I love these visualization techniques that give you a bit more of a bird's eye view on things, rather than it being just this up, down, limited exposure.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And we've also run sort of team coaching sessions where people bring out things and then pin things onto a whiteboard, or to put their experiences of their coaching in, and then other people only what they want to share. So it's within the bounds of the confidentiality, because they're the ones sharing it to the rest of the organization. And other people do the same team coaching exercise. And we've done this across sort of, hundreds of teams, and they all build into the same space. And sort of arrange things such that you get a sort of picture of the company, which is the things that have come out of the coaching. And you can do, we've done that over a sort of couple of weeks, and then you can stand back, and anyone can stand back and look at it and start seeing the patterns and relationships between the organization. And sometimes we see things which would never have known if you'd have just asked every single team and not correlated the stories that they bring together. And then that often leads to experiments which no one would have ever considered without those exercises.
Another thing I think that's linked to this that I'm experimenting with is using ENPS surveys as a way of gauging how happy people are. And you can also obviously request feedback and comments as to what's influenced their decision there. And by doing that, and then you get this list of 100 comments or whatever, and you can then use various tools in, again, Miro, probably one of my favorite ones, to do like an affinity mapping, using where it just clusters all the data together and does little causal links between them. So again, it's just another way of visualizing the information. And I think that can be quite powerful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And this goes back to the comment on meaning making. So information isn't enough. It's the meanings that we put out of them. And these tools and workshops are really about designing to make it easy to make meaning out of all of this information, so that we can then take the most effective, or hopefully the most effective strategy forwards, given the information we've got. Yeah, good.
Wonderful. Well, I want to take us slightly away from what we've just been talking about. And I know you've been quite the proponent for enterprise coaching, and you've helped with developing, I think Virtually Agile now has the enterprise coaching cohorts, which is more of a longitudinal study, a longitudinal way of learning and progressing and developing one's career. I what I like about this is it's beyond just that, you do a 2-day workshop and suddenly you get a qualification, right? And it builds in that over time, longitudinal study. What do you feel are, I guess, the key differences between those sorts of offerings out there, and what benefits do you see from them with those that are involved in those cohorts?
Yeah, and this is really close to my heart, actually. We spent 2 years working with IC Agile to build the competencies for this cohort before we even started writing the actual cohort program. And then we spent another year writing the cohort program. So this has been many, many years of building the whole cohort. And the reason why we spent so long on this is because what we're dealing with is, as we mentioned earlier in this recording, was there's so many different elements all related to each other in enterprise coaching and within the organizations that we serve. So you've got this massive complex web. And when we try to make sense of that, we try to make sense of it in a linear way. Right, what's the most important thing? What's the next most important thing? How does that relate? And before you know it, you've got back into a massive complex web again. And so it's very hard to pull apart what exactly are the competencies required for an enterprise coach to be effective. Where do you start learning? Which bit? There's so much of it. And so we spent that long to try to unravel this stuff and so that it could be made simple for people to understand. And the value of doing this whole program in the cohort is that because it is complex and we like to make things simple because that's the way our brains work, then people very quickly get lost. And but in doing this role, especially when there are so many demands and so many constraints around this role from the organizations we serve themselves. We're dealing with many people who don't get it, who are resistant to it, who are fearful of change, and at the same time we need to be able to progress and show results. And so the programs are to join together people in the similar roles, similar pressures, with similar challenges, and guide them through the competences which we all took so long in defining, so that people can not only get some knowledge acquisition, because that's definitely part of it, to absorb some knowledge, but just like in the swimming example, the only way to really learn this is to actually go and be an enterprise coach, which ends up being a catch-22, because how do you be an enterprise coach if you haven't got the experience? But how do you get the experience unless you're doing the role? So because this is a fairly new industry, as in only been around for the last few years, not the last 50 years or 20 years, everybody is learning en masse because this is what's required everywhere. So if we're all learning, none of us completely know the whole industry or all of these different things. How can we collectively make this effective and lower the risk for the organizations we serve, lower the risk for us individually in both our learning, but also our effectiveness, and so that we've got maximum chance of success? And so that's really what the cohort's about. It's about grouping together people who are doing this and giving them the maximum chance that they've got for making a success and to learn themselves in this incredibly complex and diverse subject.
I think there's a beauty in a beauty in the vulnerability in that you're admitting that there isn't a predefined answer to it. We are on this learning journey together, and what we're actually doing is bringing together like-minded people in similar roles, so they can learn together, share with one another, collaborate with one another, and develop with one another. I think it's quite powerful, rather than just this, well, if you do this, you'll be agile. If you finish this course, you'll be agile.
Yeah, exactly. And we wanted to, right from the outset, we wanted to remove that idea of the learning journey being a finite space. There is a place for knowledge acquisition, I believe. There is a place for going on courses and training and gaining knowledge and things like that. But there's also a place for being supported within the practice of that. And for the cohort programs that we run, we ask people to go on our enterprise classes, which are in the classroom training. But we don't pretend that after those classes, that's it. You're going to now be an enterprise coach and can face any situation that the world will throw at you. We hope that you'll be more prepared. You've got more tools and more kit, if you like, to do it. But you're still on your own. And the cohort program fixes that by saying, well, how do we support each other? And of course, any cohort program that's based around coaching or support, you end up making such fantastic connections and really getting to know the people well. And to be honest, it's an absolute honor to be around the people on some of these cohorts who are dedicating that much time and energy to their own careers, to helping others, because it is a service role, what we're doing. We're trying to make other people's lives better, which does attract the sort of people who, I like to hang out with and to be around. And so it's been an absolute pleasure, to be honest, to have the people on the cohorts and to learn about their organizations and about them. Certainly been very learning for me as well.
This very much resonates with me as someone who firmly believes in that continuous learning style of doing things. I jokingly say sometimes that when I have a child, I'll call them Kanban, because they are a continuous work in progress. And don't worry, Simon, I'm not going to do that to that poor child, but I do firmly believe in this. I am personally a collection of scars and bruises and mistakes and errors, and all of those have shaped who I've become today because I've been learning as I've been going along. So investing in your own learning is so important. And I'm keen to hear how you personally, how do you invest in your own continuous learning?
Yeah, it's crazy because it seems sometimes like I still feel slightly guilty sometimes because I barely get work done because everything is about the learning. I'm a bit of a learning junkie in a way. So I learn probably the deepest I learn is when I'm actually working with clients and I'm doing work myself. I try to step back from that a little bit to run AWA, but I do always keep a hand in a little bit and do bits here and there. I learn from the people that I'm working with in terms of the cohorts, like we mentioned, and people coming on the training. People are always sharing their stories and their ideas, so I learn from them as well. I love going on the courses, so we ask people to come to AWA to run their courses from all over the world, and I'm in a very fortunate position where I get to go on their courses, normally for free. So I get a lot of training for free, which is very a perk of the job in a way. And then, of course, there's the community, which we host our webinars and things and meetups every month, sometimes more than a month. So I get to sit on most of those and learn from people there. And then sometimes like at the moment, I'm learning to be a therapist. So I'm literally paid for a training course, and I'm on the training course, and I'm learning to become a therapist. So that's just one of the things that that's just what I'm doing at the moment. So yeah, it's constant learning. I'm reading books all the time. Every time I drive and pick my children up, I've got audio books playing in the car at 1.5 speed. So yeah, it's pretty much ongoing, to be honest.
Sounds excellent. Right then, so you mentioned about enterprise coaching. You've been helping set the standard for what enterprise coaching is, defining those competencies. In your view, what would you say is the difference between a scrum master, maybe an agile coach, and an enterprise coach? How would you define those differences?
Yeah, it's a question that comes up quite a lot, and there are clearly common elements across all three roles which are the same. So for example, professional coaching is something which I think is valuable at any of those levels, which is really about growing another person. It's same as mentoring as well. And all three of those roles have very key, strong elements of mentoring and growing others to do their role. I think that there is quite a difference in terms of the depth of the relationships that happen. For example, a scrum master is often with the same team, sees them on a daily basis, and builds very strong, deep relationships with the team. Agile coaches, especially if they have, say, 100 people that they look after, they still probably with that number of people will know 90% of the faces in their area, if not all of them, but they won't, and they'll have maybe a few people that they operate with on a semi-daily basis, but it won't quite be the same. And an enterprise coach is even less deep relationships. They may have more relationships with the leadership, but again, leaders are very busy. They don't spend every day with them. They spend their day with a lot of different people. So there's a depth of relationship there, which I think is different. Different knowledge of the business as well. So there's some very deep things that Scrum Masters need to know about their teams, about if it's a technical team, then they're going to really need to understand that sort of approach to the way the team's working and how they can best create the right environment for the teams. And people working at sort of portfolio level are probably going to need to know a bit more about how work flows through different departments and the constraints and budgets and things like that. And then at an enterprise level, we need to start looking at sort of whole fulfillment cycles and and how the leadership relates, and what kind of environment is being set, and what kind of organizational risks are being taken on. And so there are different skills across the different or different levels of knowledge, really. So some things are the same, some things are different. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And thanks for not mentioning the pessimistic view, which is usually something around a couple of £100 extra in day rate.
Well, this is interesting because it's unfortunate, because those three roles are not hierarchical, in my opinion. And what happens is that the reason why the day rate comes into it is because we're mapping a non-hierarchical profession into a hierarchical organization, which typically rewards members at the top of that hierarchy greater than those below. Enterprise people tend to work higher up in the organization, and therefore their pay is it ends up being more than those people below. But when you look at the depth that, say, someone who's been doing software development for 25 years, or a scrum master who's been doing their craft for 25 years, that person has immense skill and ability to create high-performing teams where the value is created. And for me, that is no less important than somebody who's an enterprise coach creating value where they are. And the pay comes in purely because we're mapping into a hierarchical system.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've definitely seen a lot of that. It's that desire to fit newer roles into industry standards, to say, right, if you're X level, this is where you're at. If you're X level, this is where you're at. And I guess it's one way to demonstrate progression. Sometimes people want to be able to see what's beyond my current role, where could I move into, and that can sometimes come into it. But also, as you say, there are sometimes structural, organizational things that people are doing there to just to align and force a hierarchy when there isn't really one intended to be there. And actually, it's interesting. My role these days is more the enterprise coaching level. I'm less exposed to the depth of relationships that you were describing. But it's for that exact reason why I still, as much as I can, will jump in and facilitate a retro. Yeah, and retro being my favorite one. It's just so I can keep anchored to the people on the ground, the work, the people doing the hard stuff, the difficult stuff, the people in the trenches. I want to remain close to that, because I think it's a shame when you lose that perspective sometimes. Almost the further removed you are from that, the less people focused you can be, because you are working with abstractions of people sometimes to an extent, because it's all risk, it's all this, it's all that, and you're not working with people as much.
Yeah, exactly. And I really like the idea of the hierarchy turned on its head. So the real value that leaders can offer, and us as enterprise coaches, is to enable those people to be able to create the value. And really, that's what the company is about, is creating value for customers. Because if you're looking at the bottom line, and I really don't like it when the leadership say, what's the purpose of the company? It's to make money. Basically, we know that. We're in a capitalist society.
That's a given, right? Yeah. No one's motivated by that. No one wakes up in the morning and thinks, do you know what I want to do today? I want to make some money for this company.
Yeah, exactly. And I have seen literally leaders stand up in front of, say, a town hall or a group of people and try to motivate them by the fact that we're going to make $1 billion this quarter. And you can see the phones come out and people start tapping their mates, because it's like, that's more interesting than motivated. And they're not going to see any of that billion. No one's going to see that. So what value do we actually add as a company? Which customers are going to come back because we're doing a better job and we're the place that they want to work at? And the people who are going to make that happen are the people in the value chain, people who are creating the value. So really, it's about how do we enable that to happen more.
Completely. Right. What in your view are the biggest barriers you've observed to organizational agility out there? What are the things stopping companies from being agile, and how would they navigate those? Yeah,
it's a brilliant question, and it changes over time. And I've seen that whatever's stopping it at the moment will be overcome, and it'll be a new barrier. And so I'm seeing this has changed over time. And I think right now the barrier is lack of strategy. Okay. So a lot of leadership are actually getting agility. So I think maybe a year or even 2 years ago, I was feeling that leaders weren't getting it. They were unable to create the right mindset. They were unable to operate in the right way. The moment stress came back in, they went back into a very tight control. Whereas I think maybe lockdown, and there may be some companies where it's got worse. I have heard stories of companies being worse through lockdown in terms of commanding and controlling. But my experience has been that actually leaders are getting it more. and they understand what is the required mindset. They can see what people need, but they don't yet know how to make it happen. So there's a lack of strategy at the leadership level in terms of how do we make this come about. And the default is like, right, I get it. I see what we need to do. Right, now, where's the detailed plan? Right, how do we, and it goes back to the old way of working because that's worked with them before. So it's really agile strategy, which I think is missing. And that's where we'll be focusing, certainly for the next year or two, in providing a better agile strategy for people.
It's interesting that I no longer use the word transformation. I think lots of companies have been through several transformations. It might have left a bad taste in their mouth. And I think that the word in itself, it suggests the wrong approach to it. It suggests that you will start something, you'll finish something, and you're done, right? And hands off. I tend to use evolution now, right? We're just continuously evolving our ways of working. It's never finite. Just like our continuous learning journey, we are continuously evolving. We're continuously getting better, hopefully. We're continually adjusting based on what we've learned, based on the new environmental factors that we're facing, based on things like COVID happening and so on and so forth, based on changes in the competitive landscape, all those things. And we're evolving and changing as an organization. And this is why, coming back to what we were saying earlier, that ability to respond and change at pace without so much resistance, without that knowledge there, is going to be so key, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the word evolution as well. I like sort of gardening metaphors or all those kind of things. Anything that doesn't assume that we've got another 3-year change plan and at the end of it we'll all be fine.
Yeah.
And we know that doesn't work. It might have worked years ago, if it ever worked, but it certainly doesn't work now. Yeah.
Right, I'm aware that you are releasing a book, or you're in the progress of writing a book. It's called Change. And to my understanding, you're releasing it chapter by chapter, almost agile authorship, which I love. It's how I intend to release my books one day. How is that going? What's that book about?
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for mentioning that. I really wanted to write something which was sort of capturing the little nuggets which we learn by being and doing agile at large scale. So it starts off with a sort of a journey around the basics of agility, which surprisingly I don't think many people have really got the idea of evolving process or emergent process and what real complexity actually means. So I've just been trying to, rather than sort of rehash a lot of the other complexity work out there, it's quite a personal account, really, the book, about the things that I have come across, the little nuggets and little wisdoms that I've found useful for myself. And it sort of progresses through what I would consider a sort of strategic progress through a evolution of an organization, and sort of starting with leadership and working through. And I talk about things like decision making and ethics and things like this, but not in the broader sense, but in the actually how can you use this stuff for your own advantage in making things work. So yeah, it's a personal account of things I think are useful for an enterprise coach and leaders. And I've called it change rather than agile change or agile transformation or agile this or agile that, just because I think that agile, as we started this journey 20 odd years ago with the Agile Software Manifesto, agile has, the industry, if there is such a thing, has been folding in more and more topics, as we mentioned, and it's becoming bigger and bigger and bigger until it almost tries to model life. And I'm wondering,
there's agile this, there's agile that. It's almost agile commoditization is what I've seen. And I had a great conversation. Mike Cohen was a guest on the show, and he was talking about how he loved the fact that, or he would love if we just stopped talking about agile. It just became what we did, right?
Yeah.
And it sounds like you've got a similar message there. You'd love it if we just stopped talking about agile, and it just became how we did things, because we knew that was what was going to get us the right outcomes.
Exactly. And that's exactly it. It's about outcomes, and it's about finding a way to get there. And pretty much, I mean, my company is Adventures with Agile, but that's pretty much as far as the Agile word goes. People come to us because they want Agile. And once we're engaged, it's pretty much the last time we'll mention it. It's really working with people to figure out what is the best way forwards for their business and the outcomes that they're looking for, and how do you organize that. And yes, a lot of those tools do come from the agile world, and but I feel like agile has taken on so much it's almost become meaningless. It's like it's coalescing with life itself.
Sure.
until it's just what we do.
And I've definitely seen this, and it's why sometimes, depending on who I'm working with, it might be a new client, it might be a new stakeholder. It's particularly difficult. They might have been through, as we've talked about, many versions of transformations. They might have experienced agile in a bad way, and sometimes you just need to remove agile from the equation to say, hey, right, what outcomes are we working towards? How can we best get that? Is it through iteratively experimenting and trying things and learning from what we're doing? Okay, well, that's some of the principles of agile anyway. And it's not saying we're going to do agile. We're going to say we're going to learn frequently, fast, often. Some of those things that we've talked about, but removing agile from the equation and doing so.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And I think one of the reasons why agile has become a difficult term is because, and I was guilty of this as well, because we didn't know any better. When we first started doing this, we took on the frameworks, we did all this stuff, and we deployed them on people's business. And we said, right, well, here's an agile process, do this, and it will work.
Copy and paste, and you are now agile.
Yeah, and now you're agile. And we tried that. We thought, oh, well, that's fantastic. We tried it, and it didn't work. And you do that a few times, and then you think, oh, well, maybe there's a different way. And then we try different things, and that's when we started looking at, well, what if we tried to coach an organization and see what comes out of that? And then we realized that coaching is fantastic, but we also need a bit of mentorship, and we also need a bit of leadership, and we need how to do other things as well. And we do need bits from the process. And so folding all these things together into something that works has gone through a lot of iterations over the years as an industry, as we've tried to figure out how to best help organizations. And some of those iterations of what it takes to move an organization forwards have been more successful than others. And so I think that some people have assigned the word agile in their head to a particular instance of how to change an organization, whether that is process first. We know that people first is a better way forwards. And so it's a bit untangling that word from an instance in time of how we approached organizational change. So anyway, that's what I think is why agile becomes difficult. People tend to latch it on to the first time they came across whatever was happening in their organization at that time. That was what agile was. And there's enough battles going on in organizational change without having to unlearn what agile means or doesn't mean.
Well, yeah, it's that unlearning. Again, one of the first things I do when I'm approaching a new situation with new people, whether that's teaching them or a new team or organization I'm working with, is first off, understand where they currently are. And if I ask them to raise their hand and say, who's worked with Agile, or who's read a book on Agile, or who's done a course on Agile, or who's been doing it for years, there'll be lots of different experiences there. And some of them might have worked with one framework and some another, and there's going to be lots of different experiences there. And it's not that they need to unlearn them. It's not that any of those that they've done is bad or negative. But what we do want to do is get everyone talking on the same hymn sheet as a starting point. Everyone understanding and aligning as to what Agile means for us, why it is we're doing it, what the outcomes are behind it. Yeah, lots of interesting things there. Final question, Simon. I always ask every guest on my show, what new theme would you add to my retrospective backlog? We've had some interesting ones. Mike Cohen challenged me to do Taco Tuesday. I've had ones about fish in a river. I've had about hiking. I've had about mountain biking. I've just today created one based on Euro 2021 for awareness. There's only one mention to It's Coming Home for those non-English fans. What would you add to my backlog, Simon?
Gosh, that's really tricky. I hadn't thought of that before. So I guess I'm probably too late for sort of themes like Lord of the Rings and things like that. I bet that's been done to death, hasn't it?
That's been done, that one in particular. That's
okay. So let's think of something topical then. So what's going on in the world, maybe? I assume that there's something that you've probably done around some kind of the way that, say, for example, COVID, for example, there must be something that you've done with that already, I should assume.
There actually is not a pandemic or COVID themed retro, so I can very much do one.
Okay.
It might be a year late in the making, but I can definitely do it.
Well, the thing is with that is that there's lots of elements that could be brought out. It doesn't have to be doom and gloom.
No.
It doesn't have to be a disaster. There's lots of complexity around the pandemic that we've learned about, and iterative approaches to solving complex problems. So there could be something in there which could be positive. Like, for example, what risks are we reducing? Perhaps masks kind of thing, or there could be something to do with threats. and how we protect against those threats. How do we make the most of the time that we've got individually? I don't know.
How can we
challenge
make, yeah, how can we make learning go viral? Yeah, how can we spread our knowledge virally and things like that? I don't know. There's lots you can do with that. I'll have a think.
Yeah. Okay. Good luck with that one.
I will create that. Well, any final thoughts you'd like to share with any of the listeners, Simon?
Only that it's a tough role, tough job, this, but there is massive hope. There are huge successes that are happening all over the place in this industry, and the biggest chance that we've got of success is if that we keep talking, we keep sharing case studies, sharing things that you've done, and encourage others to do the same, because we do lack that in our industry, really good case studies. If we can share these things, keep listening to things like this, and keep learning, because it's it's a fantastic role to be part of, and thank whoever's listening to this for listening. Thank you, and thank you for inviting me.
No problem, Simon. Wonderful parting sentiments. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for giving everyone your knowledge there. For anyone else keen on listening, in the remaining episodes of season 2, we'll be hearing from Pia Thorin, co-author of the Agile People Manifesto. We've got Ravi J, an Agile Transformation and Delivery Director at North Highland Consultancy. We've got Neil Warnell, who's a Chief Visualization Officer at Humble Associates. So do keep an eye out on the YouTube channel and LinkedIn to find out and hear more about those episodes as they are released. Pleasure as always. Thank you very much, Simon.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.